Hi there, welcome back. If you look at the screen, we'll be doing a past year review on Cambridge International AS and A-Level Computer Science for Paper 2 Fundamental Problem Solving and Programming Skills for the May-June 2022 series. We will be doing the first variant, which is 9618/21. First of all, you will need a 2022 May-June paper, which is 9618/21 question paper, and then you will need a 2022 May-June 9618/21 mark scheme so that you can actually refer your question with the answer. And next will be insert as well. So for those of you who do not know what insert is, basically insert is just a documentation or a paper that will be given to you during the exam itself. It contains all the functions that are taught from chapter 9 to 12 for you to refer so that you can answer some of the pseudocode questions. So these are the three files that you will need for this tutorial itself. Definitely you can get the question paper, the mark scheme, the insert just by doing a basic Google search, or you can just refer to my website whereby I compile all the question paper and mark scheme as well as the insert into one place. So let's look at which file we should download for this tutorial itself. First of all, we'll be using this file itself, 2022 May June 9618_21_ question. So we'll be using this question itself, and then for mark scheme is the same, just using the same format. We'll be using this 2022 May June 9618_21 answer. As well as for the insert itself, you can just use this 2022 May June insert because it doesn't really matter if you use 21, 22, 23, they are all the same. And without further delay, let's go into the question itself. So let's start from question 1. A programmer draws a program flowchart to show the sequence of steps required to solve a problem. Give the technical term for a sequence of steps that describe how to solve a problem. So for this question, it's pretty straightforward. They talk about program flowchart and sequence of steps. So these are the keywords for algorithm. So the answer will be an algorithm. And next, the table lists some of the variables used in a program. Complete the table by writing the most appropriate data type for each variable. So let's look at this first variable here. Variable temp, use a variable, stores the average temperature. So what is the data type? So when you're storing temperature, you know that you always need decimal point. For example, you need like 37.2 Celsius, 40.5 Celsius. So what will be the data type? Definitely the answer will be real, which means that it has decimal. And next, let's look at the pet name. Stores the name of my pet. So you know that your pet can name as a cat or hello or happy, sad or whatsoever. So this is definitely a string. So the data type will be a string. So my DOB means that to calculate the number of days until my next birthday. So these are all the dates. So you know the data type will be date. And next is light on, which means that you're storing the state of light, whether the light is on or off. So definitely some of my students actually answer string as the answer because they think that you can write it as on or off. Definitely it's not wrong in programming perspective. You can definitely use it as a string, but for this example itself, it's better if you use boolean, which means that it's actually true or false. For example, when the light is on, it's going to be true, and when the light is off, it's going to be false. And next, let's look at one of the names used for variable in the table in part 1 BI is not an example of good practice. Identify the variable and give a reason why it is not good practice to use that name. So out of the 4 variables on the top here, one of the variables is not using a good name. So temp, pet name, my DOB, light on. So for the first variable temp, if you look at this, it's actually used to store the average temperature. So if you look at this variable temp, you might not think of temp as the average temperature. For pet name, definitely from the variable name itself, you know that this is the pet name. My DOB stands for my date of birth. But definitely some of you might argue that DOB can stand for some other thing. But definitely most will agree that DOB actually stands for date of birth. Light on seems correct. So definitely the answer will be variable temp. So temp is not a good variable being used for this example here. The reason is the name does not indicate what the variables is used for. So as I say, temp doesn't really tell you that it's actually storing the average temperature. So maybe a better example would be AVGTMP. Maybe there will be a better variables for this use case. And let's look at question C. Complete the table by evaluating each expression. So these are all the expression and these are the evaluation. It means that after this expression, what would be the end result? So let's look at this. In bracket 31 divided by 3 plus 1. Definitely some of you might not remember what does in int do, but no worries because the insert is given to you during the exam. So let's look at the insert itself. So this is the insert itself. So this will be given to you during the exam, and let's look at the insert itself. So where is int? Can we find int from here? It seems like a no from the first page here. And let's look at this second page here. Do we have int here? So this is int here. So int actually returns an integer. So this function actually returns integer, and it actually returns the integer part of x. Definitely, sometimes you might not understand what does the description mean or what does the explanation actually mean. Always look at the example. So what's the example for this int function? So let's look at this. Int 27.5415 actually returns 27, which means for this real number, we'll be removing this dot 5415 from this real number itself, and we'll return this 27 itself. So this is the int function. And let's go back into the question itself. So first of all, we will have 31 divided by 3 plus 1. So what is 31 divided by 3? It will be 10.3333 plus 1. You will get 11.33333. So 11.3, and then you are just getting the integer part of this 11.3. So the answer definitely will be 11 here. So this is how you actually do the expression evaluation. So let's look at a second example. Mid bracket to upper version 4.2. So this to upper definitely is also in the insert itself. So feel free to have a look from the insert itself. But for now, we just assume that we know what to upper is. So to upper actually convert a small letter to capital letter. So version, everything will be converted into capital letter. So be V capital, E capital, R capital letter, and etc. And then mid actually just take characters from the string itself. So for example, 2 means that we are taking from index 4, and then we'll be using 2 character. So assuming that we have all the capital V version here, so here will be V, capital E, and everything capital letter. And then let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4. So S will be the first character, and since we are taking 2 characters based on the mid function here, we'll be taking S and I. So the answer will be SI. So definitely this is capital letter S, capital letter I, and always remember to put this quotation on the left and right to indicate that this is a string. Without the quotation, you might get penalized, so just be careful on this. And next will be true and not false. So not false means that it's true because it's not false, and true means that 1 and 1 you should get true. So the answer will be just true. And next will be num to string 27 mod 3. Definitely if you don't know what mod mean and don't know what num to string is, definitely just feel free to refer to the insert. Since I have done a few times, I definitely know what mod and num to string mean. So let's do together. 27 mod 3. So it means that we are just doing a modulus 27 based on 3. So 27 divided by 3, we will get 9. And then the remainder will be 0. And then since will be what we means that we'll be converting this number 0 into string. So the final answer would be just this. So this will be the final answer, 0 with quotation here. So always be careful on this quotation because now we are converting to string. It's not an integer anymore. Therefore, you will need this quotation. Without this quotation, you might not get the full mark, or you just get 0 mark for this question itself. So this is 4 mark. So this is 1 mark for each of the answer. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So always be careful at the quotation. So let's talk about question 2. Examine the following state transition diagram. So for those of you who do not know what state transition diagram is, definitely can refer to my online tutorial video. So let's look at this. We have start here, we have S1, state 1, we have state 3, state 4, state 2, we have button Y, button Z, button X, and then we have output A, output B, and output C here. So this is a state transition diagram. And let's look at the question itself. First of all, complete the table with reference to the diagram. So let's look at this. Number of different input. So how many inputs are there for this question itself? Let's look at this. How many buttons are there? We have like button Y, button Z, and button X. So the answer should be 3 because we have X, Y, and Z as an input. So just imagine that someone is pressing either of these 3 buttons in order to produce certain output. So let's look at the answer itself. So as I say, the answer will be 3. So this is the answer. The number of different outputs. So let's look at the output. How many outputs are there? So let's look at the output. We have output A, output B, output C. Therefore, the output should be 3 as well. So let's look at the answer. So the output is 3. The single input value that could result in S4. So let's look at S4 here. What would be the input value? So look at this. So this is coming from S3 to S4 or S2 to S4. So these are the 2 possible states that will result in S4. And what is the input? Let's look at this. It's going to be button Y. So this should be the answer. So let's look at the answer itself. So here you go. So this is button Y as an answer. And next, the initial state is S1. Complete the table to show the inputs, outputs, and next states. What you need to do is that you can just refer to the diagram above and then just fill up all the blanks in this table itself. So let's start with S1. So input is button Y. And what will be the output? So look at this. So when you have button Y as the input, what will be the output? Let's look at this. There is no output for button Y. So the first answer should be none. So here you go. This is none as output. And what is the next state? So when you click on button Y, you will go from S1 to S3. So the answer should be S3. And next, what will be the next input here, which results in none as the output? So let's look at this with S3 here. So we will get either button Z or button Y as the input. So which button will result in a none output? So let's look at this. So it will be button Y as the input. So let's look at the answer will be button Y. And what is the next state after you click button Y? And next, let's look at button Z. So imagine that you have in S4 right now here, and you click on button Z. So the output will be output B. So look at this, the output B, and S4 will go to S2 when you actually click button Z. So right now you're in S2 here. And let's look at this. When you are in S2, which button will actually result in none as an output? So we only have button Z here. So this answer will be button Z as the input. And let's look at the next state. So S2, after clicking button Z, it will result in S1. So this will be the answer. So these are the final answer for this table. Definitely, if you look at this for the first time, you'll look a bit confusing. But once you get a hang of how state transition diagram work, it's actually quite straightforward. And now we can look into question 3. So let's look at this question. The manager of a cinema wants the program to allow user to book seats. The cinema has several screens. Each screen shows a different film. So let's look at A. Decomposition will be used to break the problem down into sub-problems. Describe 3 program modules that could be used in the design. So for this question, what you can do, you can just visualize that you're actually using this mobile booking app from your phone, and you're actually using it to book a movie from a particular cinema. So you can think of what are the features that will be available in the booking app itself. So without looking at the answer, definitely you know that you need something to actually, first of all, to book the movie. Maybe you need something to book the seat, maybe you need something to calculate the cost, or even buy food, buy drinks, refund, and etc. So let's look at the official answer here. So first of all, we have allows the user to search for films being shown. So this is actually quite straightforward. You actually have this mobile booking app, you're just searching the films that you actually want to watch. And next will be allows the user to search for available seats. Definitely you need to choose the seat that you want from the mobile booking app itself. And next, calculate the cost of booking. Definitely once you are done with choosing the film, choosing the seat, you want to know the total cost of this booking itself. So these are the 3 modules. And let's look at B. 2 types of program modules may be used in the design of the program. Identify the type of program module that should be used to return a value. So if you look at this, the keyword for this question is return a value. So what would be the answer? The answer will be function here. Now let's look at question 4. So a stack is created using a high-level language. Memory location 200 to 207 are to be used to store the stack. The following diagram represents the current state of the stack. Top of stack points to the last value added to the stack. So this is the table itself. So we have memory location 200 to 207, and then we have all the values here, and we have the pointer here, and F is actually the top of stack. So for those of you who doesn't know what stack is, you can either refer to my online video, or you can just refer to the picture on the left here. So just think of it this way. Stack is just like a plates which are stacked on top of each other. So just think of it this way. So let's look at the question itself. Complete the following table by writing the answers. First of all, the value that has been on the stack for the longest time and what would be the answer. So this is actually quite straightforward. What happened is that it will be bottom of the stack. So if you look at this plate here. So this plate should be in the stack for the longest time ever. So what will be the answer? So definitely the answer will be H here. So let's look at the answer. So this is H. So just be careful when you write any answer because this is actually a character. So you have to have a single quotation here. So let's say you just write like H here, you might get penalized and you might lose your 1 mark here. So just be careful on that. And next, the memory location pointed to by top of stack if 3 pop operations are performed. So let's look at this. The question is asking for memory location when there are 3 pops. So let's just go through together. So first of all, we have this F, C, D, E, H here. So just think of it this way. Pop is just like removing the plates from the stack of plates. So you just imagine that you're just removing 3 plates from this stack of plates here. So let's look at this. First of all, we remove 1 pop, remove F. Second pop, remove C. Third pop, I remove D. So what would be on the top of stack would be E here. And what is the memory location of E? It will be 206. So the answer should be 206. So let's look at the answer. So here you go. So the answer will be 206. And let's look at B. So look at this. The following diagram shows the current state of the stack. So let's look at this. This is all the stack. We have memory location and value. So this is a bit different from the previous page. So it's okay. So it's 200 to 207 with different value here. And the following operations are performed. Pop, pop, push A, push B, pop, push C, and push D. So let's do together. And then what happens is that complete the diagram to show the state of the stack after the operations have been performed. So look at this. We have stack here, we have pointer here, and then we have memory location 200, 207, and these are all the values that we have to fill in order to get the marks of 4 points here. So let's do together using the annotation tool that I open here. So let's start with pop. So first instruction is pop. So let's pop the top of the stack. So I remove this W here. Okay, so I just remove this. And then we'll do a pop again. So I remove this first and then we'll just pop the Y. And next is push A, means that I'm actually pushing something to the top of the stack. So I'll be pushing A to the top of the stack. So let me just write an A here. So it will be A here. And next, just let me remove this as well, push A. And next I will push B. So let me just put something on top of a stack as well. So this will be on the top of A. And then just delete this. And then I will do a pop again, so I remove B, so I just do a pop, and then remove B here. And next will be push C, so I'll be putting C on top of A. So let me do this, so C on top of A here, and then I will just remove this C here. And next will be push D, so I'll put D on top of C. So let me just put D here, and then I will just remove this as well. So yeah, we are done with the operation. And next, I just have to fill in all the answer in the table below. So let's look at the answer together. So first of all, for memory location 200 will be empty and start with 201. So let's look at what is 201. So look at this answer here. So 201 should be D here. So the answer will be D here. So when you fill in the D, so I purposely make a mistake on the top. So for D here, I didn't include the single quotation here, but in the exam itself, you have to be careful. You have to insert the single quotation all the time for single character. So let's look at this. I have to have this single quotation here on this D itself. And next, we have to label this D as top of stack. So let's look at this. So we have to label this as top of stack. So you get like one point and half a point for this answer here. And then 202 will be C here. So with the quotation C. And next will be just A. And then next will be just, we can just copy from the top, so it'll be X, Z, and P. So let's look at this. X, Z, and P. And yeah, so this is the final answer. Next, let's look into question 5. So let's look at this question 5 here. Each line of a text file contains data organized into fixed length fields as shown, field 1, field 2, field 3. An algorithm is required to search for the first instant of a given value of field 2 and, if found, to output the corresponding values for field 1 and field 3. Describe the algorithm needed. Do not include pseudocode statements in your answer. So for this question, they are just asking you to describe the algorithm. So actually it's quite simple. So just doing a description. So how do we start with this question? So normally what I do with my students is that we will just do a practical example first. We'll just try to come up with an imaginary example. And then from there, we'll try to come up with a solution. So let's look at the imaginary example here. So let's look at this. So first of all, I have field 1, field 2, field 3. There is no empty space in between them. So just imagine that there's app, cat, dry. They are just all tied together as shown as the top here. Field 1, field 2, field 3. And then what we're trying to look for is actually I'm trying to look for this field 2, which is dog here. So look at the question at the top, they're actually searching for the field 2, for example, and when they found field 2, they actually output the value of field 1 and field 3 from the file itself. So let's look at the workflow here. So first of all, I will open the file since this is a text file. So first of all, we will go through line by line. So let's look at the first line. App, cat, dry. So is the second instance, which is field 2, is dog? No. If it's not, I will just move on to the second line. So I'll look through the second line here. Hey, you try. Is you a dog? No, it's not dog. So I just look through the third line again. So land, dog, feed. So on the third line itself, we found dog. So once I found dog, I will just output the field 1 and field 3. And finally, since I already found dog, I will just close the file. So the workflow will be first open the file, look through each line, and try to search for field 2. If field 2 match what we are trying to search, we actually output field 1 and field 3. And once we found field 2, we will just close the text file. So let's look at the answer itself. So I have put this example on the top here just for your reference so that we can know better when we go through the answer together. So let's look at the answer here. So first of all, we will just open the file in read mode. We don't have to open in write mode since we don't have to write anything. We're just going to read all the files. And next will be set up a conditional loop repeating until the value is found or the end of file is reached. So EOF brackets and end of file means that we have reached the end of the lines for this particular text file here. So this is the loop. So this is the condition of the loop is either if the value is found or when we reach the last line of the text file. And next, read a line from the file in the loop. So as I say, we'll just read the first line here. We'll read a line from the file in the loop and then we'll extract field 2 using substring function and length of field 1 and field 2. So for example, we're gonna use this function here, meet this string 4, 3 for this example that I show on the top. So for example, in order to extract dog from this example here, it's gonna be the fourth character here. So index 1, 2, 3, 4. and then it's going to be 3 characters, so it's going to be 1, 2, 3. Therefore, we put 4, 3, and we're going to use meet this string 4, 3. Definitely for this question's sake, you actually don't have to include this example meet this string 4, 3 by just putting here so that you can understand better. So definitely in the exam, you can just put abstract field 2 using substring function and length of field 1 and field 2 and full stop. That's more than enough. It's just that I'm putting meet here so that you can understand better on what we're trying to do here. And next, compare abstracted field with search values. For example, I'm going to compare cat with dog, you with dog, dog with dog. Just like that. I'm just doing a comparison here. And next, if the search value is found, extract field 1 and field 3 and output them. So as I say, this is what we're trying to do here. When we found dog, we'll just output field 1 and field 3. So we just write this in English form here. And next, close the file after the loop has finished. So once we found this, or once we reach the end of the file, we just close the file. And now let's look at question 6. So an algorithm will output each integer value between 100 and 200 that ends with the digit 7. For example, 107. Output the final count of the numbers of values that are output. So write pseudocode for this algorithm. Any variables used must be declared. So for this question, they're asking you for pseudocode. So this is going to be a more difficult question, but no worries. Let's just go through together. So when I guide my students on this type of pseudocode question, normally I give them 5 prompts to answer before diving straight to the answer, because writing the answer straight away might not be the most efficient way to answer this type of question. So let's look at the 5 prompts first. So first of all, we have logic. So logic is very important for this type of question. So you have to totally understand what the question is asking you to do and fully understand the logic behind before you dive straight into writing any answer at all. And next will be input. So maybe you have 1 input, 2 input, or multiple inputs. And what is the output? Maybe you have 1 output, 2 output, or multiple outputs. Or operation. What is the right operation based on the logic that's being defined in the question? And finally, variables. So once you come up with this logic input output operation, you have to come up with this variable, the data type, and what is the initial values for all the variables. So definitely, if you're interested to do this on your own, definitely just go through these 5 prompts yourself and pause the video, answer the prompts before looking at my explanation. So first of all, let's look at logic itself. So from 100 to 200, we will extract 107, 170, 127, and finally we will just output the total number of matches. It means that, for example, we have like 3 numbers here, so the answer will be 3. Since 1 plus 1 plus 1 is going to be 3, but definitely from 100 to 200 we should get around 10, so that should be the final answer. So let's just get the logic synced into our mind. So it means that first, 100 to 200, extract out any numbers that ends with 7, then we'll output any match number, and finally we'll just sum the total number of matches. So this is the pure logic based on the question itself. And next, let's look at the input. So what would be the input? So it's going to be integer from 100 to 200. So this should be the only input. And next is going to be the output. So the first output is going to be match number. It means that let's say we found 107, it's going to be outputting this number. And then 117, 127, etc. And the final output is going to be total occurrences of number ending with 7, which means that let's say we have 107 and 117, this is going to be 2 times and etc. So we're just going to sum them one by one. And next is going to be the operation. So how do we do this operation based on the logic? So let's look at this. How do you get 107, 17, 27, 37, and 47? So we can loop through every number and divide number by 10. So if the remainder is 7, it's going to be a match. So how to do this? For example, let's look at this example. Let's say you go from 100 to 107. So let's look at this. 100 divided by 10. What's the remainder? The remainder is going to be 0. 101 divided by 10. What's going to be the remainder? It's going to be 1. So how about 107 divided by 10? 107 divided by 10 is going to get you 10 with the remainder of 7. So it's a match. So we're just going to repeat this all the way to 200. So let's look at another example. Let's say we have 137. 137 divided by 10, we're going to get 13 with 7 as the remainder, and it's a match as well. And then we just keep track of the count when it's a match. For example, let's say you found 107, you're just going to take a counter, click it, it's going to be 1. And then 117, you're going to take another counter and click it, so it becomes 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6, and then etc. So this should be the operation. And next, since we have loop here, so this is a loop here, we have to think of what type of loop that we're going to use for this question itself. So let's look at this. So what type of loop? We're going to be using count control loop. Since we know that we're going to loop from 100 to 200, this is going to be a for loop from 100 to 200. So this is the type of loop that we'll be using for this question itself. And finally, let's look at the variable. So what will be the variable based on the logic, the input, the output, and the operation? So let's look at this. The first variable is going to be number of count to count total occurrences starting from 0. So remember what I just told you, we have this counter here, it's going to click 1, and then you click again 2, 3, 4, and 5, and etc. when you found a match. And next is gonna be an integer to keep track of the number from 100 to 200. Since we need something to keep track of the number from 100 to 200, therefore we just use a variable to indicate the number. For example, let's say 100, and then next is 101, 102, 103, and etc. all the way to 200. So these are the two variables that we're going to be using for this question itself. So we have logic, input, output, operation, and variable. And once we get all the prompts done, we can start writing the answer. So this is the prompt on the right, and let's look at the answer itself. So first of all, we'll start from declaring the variables. So what will be the variables? So first of all, we declare this in as an integer. So just name it as this in as an integer. So this actually represents this, an integer to keep track of the number from 100 to 200. And next, declare count as an integer data type. So look at this. This is for this number of count to count total occurrences starting from 0. Since we know that it's going to start from 0, we're just going to assign a number to this count here. So let's just do a declaration here. So count is 0. So it means that initial value of count is going to be 0. And next, for this integer, 100 to 200 means that this is for this operation here. So this is a for loop here. So let's look at this. I'm going to loop from 100 to 200 based on this integer. So we're just going to do a for loop. And next is going to be the logic. So this is the logic here. How do you get 107? It's going to do a modulus. So let's look at this. If this integer mod 10 is equal to 7, then. So definitely sometimes you might forget how do you do mod, like you know the logic but you can't remember what is the operation. No worries, you can always refer to the insert that's given to you in the exam, and from there you should be able to find this mod here with the definition at the example. So this mod 10 actually stands for you are just getting the remainder for this number. For example, 100 mod 10, you should get 0 because 100 divided by 10, you get 10 with 0 as a remainder. 107, you get 10 with 7 as a remainder. So this is going to be logic. If this in mod 10 is equal to 7, then output this in. So this is based on this statement here. We're going to output the match number. When we found 107, we're going to output this 107. And next is going to be count is equal to count plus 1. So every time you found a match, you will just do an increment of 1 to the variable count. And next is going to be an end if. You just end the if statement. And next is going to be next this in, which means that we're going to increase this in by 1. For example, 100, 101, 102, 103, and etc. And after finishing the loop, we'll just output the total count. So this is the output count here. So let's just go through the answer together again. So first of all, we start with the declaration variable, this in count, and then we assign 0 as the initial count value. Then we do a for loop from 100 to 200, and then we do a if statement here. If this in mod 10 is equal to 7, then we output a number, and then we just increase the count by 1, and then we just end the if statement, and then we just increase the this in by 1 so that we can finish the whole loop. And then finally, we just output the total count. Now let's look at question B. Study the following pseudocode case of my switch. So it means that when my switch is equal to 1, this character is going to be A. When my switch is going to be 2, this char is going to be Y. When my switch is going to be 3, this char is going to be 7. Otherwise, this char is going to be this star here. And then we just end the case statement. So what's the question? Write pseudocode with the same functionality without using a case structure. So basically, we just have to convert this into an if-else statement. So let's look at the answer itself. So if my switch is equal to 1, then this char is going to be A. So we're just changing the case statement into an if statement. Else, if my switch is equal to 2, then this char is equal to Y. Else, if my switch is equal to 3, then this char is going to be 7. And lastly, we're going to have another else. So else, this char is going to be equal to star. And we'll just end the third if statement, and then end the second if statement, and then finally end the first if statement. So for this type of if-else question, it's actually quite doable. The only thing that you have to be careful is the indentation. So let's look at this. So for example, the first if-else, you have to be indented on the first line here, and then the second if-else with the purple line here, and finally the third if-else with the orange line there. So just be careful on the indentation. Let's move on to question 7. A string is a palindrome if it reads the same forwards and backwards. The following strings are example of palindromes. Race car, madam, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you read from the left to the right. It's the same as when you read from right to the left. So it's the same. Uppercase and lowercase characters need to be treated the same. For example, capital A is equivalent to small letter a. So it means that we're going to treat everything the same regardless whether it's capital letter or small letter. A function is palindrome will take a string parameter. The function will return true if the string is a palindrome and will return false if the string is not a palindrome. write pseudocode for its palindrome. So for this question, they are just asking you to write a pseudocode and return true if it's a palindrome and return false if it's not a palindrome. So this is quite a clear question with a very direct instruction. So let's look at a typical workflow then. First of all, we have what's the logic, what's the input, what's the output, what's the operation, and what is the variables. So let's go through each of these prompts together. So let's start with logic. Create a function which returns true if the input string is the same after reversal. For example, race car is equal to race car, else return false. So this is the core logic that we need to do for this question. And since uppercase and lowercase need to be treated the same, we will convert everything to either small letter or capital letter during comparison. It means that, for example, for this situation here, we might convert this whole thing to small letter or convert this whole thing to capital letter, and do the same for this one. Let's say I convert everything to capital letter here. I need to convert all of this to capital letter as well before I do the comparison. This is so that we can fulfill the question requirement. So let's look at how can we compare the character. So the easiest way is to compare the first and last character, and then second with second last, and etc. We will immediately return false once they are not the same. So for even characters, we will compare every character. For example, let's say 4 characters. For odd characters, we will compare every character except the middle character, because it doesn't matter if you read from the left or read from the right. We just don't care about the middle if it's an odd number of characters. So for example, madam here, so these are 5 characters, we mean this is odd characters. It means that we don't really care about D. So what we do here is that we will just do an uppercase M, this first one here, compare with uppercase small m here. So this M will compare with this M here, and then uppercase A. So this A here, I make it uppercase, compare with uppercase A here. So I'll make this uppercase as well, and then we just skip the D. So this is what we're going to do here for this comparison. And next, let's look at the input. So for the input, we have input with data type string. So we're going to pass in a string so that we can say, hey, is this string a palindrome? And then output, what we're going to be the output? Output is just a true or false with data type boolean. So the input will be just string, and the output will just be true or false with data type boolean. And next, let's look at the operation. So what is the operation? So first of all, we will calculate the number of comparison to be made. For example, 4 characters will mean 2 times comparison, 6 characters means 3 times, and 9 characters, as I say, we will skip the middle character, so because it's going to be 4 times. So we'll be using this as an index and to compute max number of operations. So for example, we have 4 character string coming in, we will know that, oh, we have to do this comparison for 2 times, so it's going to be the first and the fourth, and then the second with the third, and etc. Yeah. So for the 6 is the same, let's see the first with the 6th, second with the 5th, and then third with the 4th. So this is how we compute the number of comparison for this question itself. And next, what loop to be used? So this is a typical question. So use a precondition loop, which is a while loop, since we want to exit as soon as we check that any comparison is invalid. For example, second character is not the same as the second last character, it will never be a palindrome, so don't bother to check the rest. So for example, we have a 6 character string. So let's say the second character is not the same as the 5th character, so we don't bother to check the 3rd and the 4th. We will just exit the loop once we know that, oh, second character is not the same as the 5th character, we just exit the loop. We don't bother to check the rest to waste computation. So this is how we're going to use while loop for this question itself. Next, we'll be using substring function to get the front character and the back character separately. So if they are not the same, we return false immediately, as I say. If they are the same, we'll increase the index to check another set of characters. So during comparison, we'll convert them to capital letter so that they are the same. So this is basically, we are just trying to use a substring function to get the first character and the last character, and then the second character with the second last character, and etc. For example, let's say we have 6 characters. Let's say first and the 6th is the same, so we'll just move the index by 1. So then we'll compare the second with the 5th, and then third with the 4th, and then we'll end the loop itself. So how do you exit the while loop? There are 2 conditions. Either we finish all the comparison, which means it's a true palindrome. Let's say we talk about this 6 character string again. First and the 6th is the same, second and the 5th is the same, third and the 4th is the same. So they are all the same, so we'll exit the while loop. So it means that this is a true palindrome because everything is the same. Or we realize that it's not a palindrome halfway through the comparison and return false immediately. It means we have these 6 characters again. First and the 6th is not the same, so we just return false immediately. We don't bother to go to the rest. Finally, as a reminder, we'll return true if we finish comparing every character. So this is what we're going to do. So this operation is very important because this is how we're going to write the code based on the logic itself. Let's look at the variable that we need. First of all, we'll be having index for while loop, which is like a pointer to tell the code which character to compare. For example, let's say the index is equal to 1, we'll be comparing 1 and 6 for the 6th character, and then we'll just move on, and then second to 5th, and then third to 4th. So basically, this index is going to tell the code which character to be compared. And then we will be having total number of iterations for while loop. So this is like total number of comparison. For example, let's say 6 characters, we have 3 comparison. Let's say we have like 8 characters, means 4 comparison, and etc. And then we'll be having left character for comparison and right character for comparison. For example, let's say we have the 1 and the 6, the 2nd and the 5th, and the 3rd and the 4th. So just imagine this side is the left and this side is the right. Finally, let's look at the answer itself. So let's look at this. I have put all the logic input output operation variable on the right just for referencing. I think it looks a bit small on the screen, but no worries, you can always refer back in the video itself. First of all, you'll be writing this function definition, which means that function is palindrome, and then the input will be a string, so we just call this an int string. So it's like an input string, and data type is going to be string, and we will be returning boolean, so returns boolean. And next, we'll be declaring the variable. So let's look at this. We have this variable here, this 1, 2, 3, 4 variables here. So we'll be declaring index and num. So index is to track the pointer, and num is to calculate number of comparison. And this is like a shortcut. So basically you can just do index, common num, and both of these are integer, or you can put it in 2 lines, which means declare index integer and then declare num integer is the same. So we can do this way. And next we'll be declaring char A and char B as character data type. So this is like for the left character and right character. So we just assume char A is the left and char B is the right. And next, let's assign initial value to index and num. So what is the initial value for the index? It's going to be 1, because we always start from 1. And then num is going to be integer length in string divided by 2. So basically what happened here is that we're just using this formula here to calculate number of comparison to be made for the string itself. Well, let's say we have this 6 character. So let's say we just put this in, length of 6 characters is going to be 6. So 6 divided by 2 is going to be 3. So in 3 is going to be 3. And let's say we have like 7 characters. So 7 divided by 2 is going to be 3.5. So int 3.5 is going to be 3 as well. So this is how we're going to skip the middle character. And next, let's start with the while loop itself. So while index is less than or equal to num, it means that let's say 1 is less than or equal to number of comparisons to be made, we'll be getting the char A, which means the left character here. So it's going to meet in string index 1. So it's going to be the first character, and then this is 1 means that we're just going to take 1 character. So it's going to be 1, 1 here, and this is going to be the input string. So it's going to be taking the first character here for the first iteration. And char B is going to be the end of this string. So mid in string length, let's say this is 6, and then minus index plus 1, meaning let's say index is 1 now. So 6 minus 1 is 5. 5 plus 1 is going to be 6, which means that we are taking the 6th character, and then we're just taking 1 character here. So therefore this is 1. So this is just imagine we are taking like the first character as a left character and the 6th character as a right character. And based on this question requirement, it's not case sensitive. So what we're going to do here is that we're just going to convert this to uppercase. If u case char A means that the left character is going to convert it to uppercase, is not equal to u case char B, then, so for example, let's say we just uppercase the first character and the 6th character, and both of them are still not equal, then we will be return false, which means that the function will just end here. We just, oh, they're not equal, just exit the whole function, we just return false, and that's it. That's the end of story. And then we'll be just ending this if statement, and let's say the first character and the 6th character, after getting uppercase, they are still the same. We will be doing index is equal to index plus 1. So it means that let's say from the most outer now, we're just going to be moving 1 step inside. So like the 1 and the 6 is going to be to the 2nd and the 5th. So just move inside. And then we'll be just ending the while loop. So what happens is that, for example, let's say 1 and 6 are the same, move inside. Then 2nd and the 5th, and then move inside, 3rd and the 4th. So we'll be just moving from the outer to the inner layer. So outer, inner layer, then inner layer again. And lastly, let's say all the characters are equal, we'll be just returning through. And then we'll just end the function. Now let's go to B. Strings may consist of several words separated by space. For example, the string never odd or even becomes a palindrome. If the spaces are removed, the program flowchart represents an algorithm to produce a string out string by removing all spaces from a string in string. So for this question, we are just removing all the empty space for the string. So this is the whole purpose of this flowchart here. But before we start, let's do a quick revision first. So this shape here, which means this is a comparison. And next, the rectangle here is actually an assignment of action. So you have to understand that this stands for comparison, and then this actually stands for assignment of action. So before we dive straight into this answer here, let's go to a demo first. So let's look at this. For example, we have a demo for the word cat. And how do we remove the empty space from this cat? So first of all, we'll be doing this. Index is equal to 1. So the out string is going to be C. So let's say our index is going to be 1. So this is like pointing to this C here. And next, when the index is equal to 2, which means that we're going to move the index by 1. So we're just going to be plus 1. And then the out string is going to be what? It's going to be C here. So out string stands for output string. So what happened here is that I just move my pointer from here to here. So this is an empty space. So there's no changes to the output string, so therefore it still stay with C. And next, let's say index equal to 3, and the output string is going to change to CA here. And let's say when the index reaches the last index, which is 4 here, we will get cat as the output string. So this is the whole logic of this flowchart itself. So you have to understand this logic first before going straight into the answer. So what it does here is that we just have this index which follow the string. So index 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we have the respective output string here. So C becomes C, and then C becomes CA, and then CA becomes CAT. So now let's go through the answer together. So first of all, label A here, set output string to empty string, which means let's say the starting output string is going to be empty, which makes sense. So this stands for A here. So I strongly advise you to actually write this on the paper when you are doing this partial question. So it means that you are just gonna take this and write it on inside this box so that you can understand better instead of looking at this table itself. And then we go to B. So what is gonna be B? What would be the right answer? Definitely the right answer would be, is index more than length of in string, which means that let's say I have reached my last index. For example, let's say I reached like the index 4 here already, which means that it has more than the length of the input string already. For example, for this cat input string, it's going to be 4. Let's say right now the index is 5, which means that I have reached the maximum index. So if it's a yes, I will just end the program. Let's say if it's a no, I will just continue with the program. So this B basically is like the end of program whereby the index has exceeded the index of the string. So for this one is that is index more than length of in string. If it's a yes, we'll just end the program. If it's a no, we'll just continue with the program. So what is going to be C? So C is a comparison. Is mid string index 1 equal to empty string here? So let's just go through together. We are just saying that is this C, the index equal to 1, is equal to empty string? If it's not, we will just do assignment, which means that we'll be setting the output string to out string n. So this n is like a append. It's just like you are just combining the original string with a new string here. So it's going to be out string, which is initially was empty, and then mid in string index 1, which means that we're just going to combine the empty string with this C. So the resulting output string is going to be C here. And then we will be just doing set index to index plus 1, which means that let's say we have done the comparison, we just move from C to this empty string here. And then this is F is going to be yes, because it means that let's say if it's an empty string, we just skip it. And then G is going to be no. So what you can do here is that you can just copy all the answer and write inside this box here. So you should understand better on what this flowchart is trying to do. And definitely you can use this demo to go through the flowchart itself and you should understand better. Let's look at the final question, which is question 8. So this is a very long question, so you just pause the video and read the question yourself first, and we'll just go straight into the question itself first. So let's look at question 8. Write pseudocode for module random char. You may wish to refer to the insert for description of the CHR bracket function. Other functions may also be required. So let's talk into detail of the question first. So this is the random char function. Generates a single random characters from within one of the following range, which is A to Z, capital A to capital Z, 0 to 9, and returns the character. So this is what the pseudocode wants us to do. And let's look at how we can do the 5 prompts together. So first of all, what will be the logic? Get a random character from one of these 3 groups, A to Z, capital A to capital Z, and 0 to 9. So what we can do here is quite straightforward. We can just do the categorization ourselves. So first of all, categorize 1 as A to Z, 2 as capital A to capital Z, and 3 as 0 to 9. So we can just do the category ourselves. And then we'll generate a random integer number from 1 to 3. So for example, we have this random function. When it's 1, it's going to be small letter A to small letter Z. When it's 2, it's going to be capital A to capital Z. And when it's 3, it's going to be 0 to 9. So we can generate this integer randomly. And after selecting a category, we'll be just picking a random character from the chosen category. So for example, I have a dice, and this dice only have 1, 2, 3 as the choices. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to throw the dice. So when I throw the dice, let's say I get 2, so it means that it's going to be capital A to capital Z. And then from here, I'm just going to throw the dice again, but this dice basically have the choices from capital A to capital Z. So I'm just going to throw the dice again to get either like capital B, C, D, and etc. So this is what I'm going to do here. Finally, I will just return the character. So this is the logic that we're going to implement for this question itself. So definitely this logic is always very important. Before you kickstart anything, always remember that you have to have the logic in mind. So for the input, it's going to be no input. And for output, it's going to be just a character, which is a char. Before we go through the operations, let's look at some of the functions that are extracted out from the insert that we will be using for this pseudocode itself. So let's look at this on the right. First of all, we have int x, which means that we just return the integer part of x And next is going to be rand, which is the random function. So this will return a real number in the range of 0 to x. So you have to be careful on this. It's not inclusive of x, which means that let's say I have a random 3, which means that I'm just going to return 0, 1, and 2 without 3. So remember on this is very important. Random 2 means we only have 0 and 1 without 2. And next, CHRX. So this returns the characters whose integer value, the ASCII value is x. So for example, CHR65 will returns A. So CHR66 will returns B, and etc. So these are the 3 core functions that we will be using for this pseudocode itself. And then let's look at the character range. For example, small letter A to small letter Z is 97 to 122. So this is actually given by the question itself. And then capital A to capital Z actually stands for 65 to 90, and then 0 to 9 actually stands for 48 to 57. So for example, let's say I want to get like capital A, I have to do like CHR 65. And then let's say small letter A, I'm just going to do like CHR bracket 97 to get small letter A. So this is how we can use this CHR function based on the insert itself. And let's look at the operation. If my random integer is 1, it will generate a random number from 97 to 122 and then CHR the number to get the character. So this is my operation. So remember, we have category 1, category 2, category 3. So remember, when we throw the dice, I get 1, which means that I get this category on the right here. It means that I have to generate another random number from 97 to 122, and then I will just char that to get a character. So this is the sample function that I'll be using here. So I'm just going to char this CHR int random 26, means that I'm just going to generate a value from 0 all the way to 25 and then plus 97. So the max number for this is going to be 122, because this can be anything from 0 to 25. So the value will be ranging from 97 to 122. So this is what we're going to do here for the first category. And let's look at the second category. So it's the same trick. It will be 65 to 90. So it will be random 26 plus 65, means the 65 can add up to 25 here, which means that it can range from 0 to 25. I'm just going to char it and then to get the character itself. And this is going to be my category 3. It's going to be random 10 plus 48, since this is 48 to 57. So 48 plus 0 to 9 to get this 0 to 9 character range. So this is like dice 1, dice 2, and dice 3. So this is my core operation. So this is very important on when we write the pseudocode. We have to understand the whole logic first and then come up with the relevant operation. And next, let's look at the variables. So we have a random integer based on the range of 1 to 3. So remember that we have this dice here. You can just throw it, you can get like 1, 2, or 3. And then we have a final output character, which means that we will output this character from this function itself. So this is the output. So function random char return char. So there's no input, so you don't have to put anything in the bracket itself, and returns a character. And next, let's look at the variable. We have declared this range integer. So this is actually for this random integer based on the range of 1, 2, 3. And then we have declared this char as char, which means that this is the final output that we're going to output from this function itself. And next, we'll go through the assignment of this range integer. So how do we do this? So integer random 3 plus 1, which means that this can be anything from 0 to 2 and then plus 1, which means that in the end, what happens is that we generate a dice which has the value from 1, 2, or 3. So this is how we can come up with this dice itself. So this is this range. And then next, we'll just come up with this case statement. Definitely you can write an if-else statement or a case statement. So for this question, we'll just stick with case statement so that it's easier to see. So let's do the case statement itself. So let's look at this case statement. So case of this range, when it's 1, this char means that this character is going to be CHRINT random 26 plus 97. So this is going to be a small letter from A to Z. And then let's say when it's 2, it's going to be random 26 plus 65, so this is going to be capital A to capital Z. And when it's 3, it's going to be int random 10 plus 48, so this is going to be 0 to 9. So this is how we can do this case statement, and then we will just end the case statement, and then we just return the chart, and then finally we'll just end the function. So always be careful on the indentation on how you define the function. So this is the pseudocode. Definitely, if you do it for the first time, it might be a bit difficult, but once you go through my 5 prompts and go through the pseudocode together, I hope you can understand better on how to answer this question right now. Now let's look at B. A new module is defined as follows: find password. Takes a website domain name as a parameter of type string, searches for the website domain name in the array secret. If the website domain name is found, the decrypted password is written. If the website domain name is not found, a warning message is output and an empty string is written. Write the pseudocode for module find password. assume that modules encrypt and decrypt have already been written. So I have created a dummy array on the right so that it's easier for you to refer. So this is the array. For example, we have this name and password here. So this is like the name www.haguin.school, and this password because it's encrypted. So this is all dot here, and then we have www.youtube.com, and then this is password is encrypted as well. So it's a dot as well. So this is the array that we're going to use. So for this question itself, let's look at the logic that we can do. So first of all, we have a 2D array with 2 columns. So first column is domain name. So this is domain name, and the second column is password. So what we do here is that we will search the array based on the given domain name. So for this question, they'll give us a domain name. For example, they are looking for this www.haguin.school. So they are looking for this domain name from this array. And then let's say if the domain name is found, we'll get a password. So let's say I found this www.haguin.school from this array itself. We'll get the password. So this password, because it's encrypted, so it's in dot form. So we'll use the decrypt function to decrypt it, and then we return the password finally. And then what if the domain name is not found? We'll output the warning message and return an empty string. So this is the core logic. Basically for this question, it's quite straightforward. Basically you have this array here with 2 columns. You try to search for the domain name based on the given domain name. Let's say you found it, you get a password, you decrypt it, and then you just return the password. And if it's not found, you can just output warning message and return an empty string. So what is the input? The input is gonna be the domain name, which is a string. And what is the output? The output is a warning message if the domain name is not found, and a password string, empty string if domain name is not found. So basically you have 2 types of output. Let's say you have the real password or an empty string if the domain name is not found. So this is the output. Next, let's look at the operation. So what is the operation? One loop to be used. So this is always a very important question. We can use a precondition loop, which is the while loop, and we will exit as soon as the password is found, or we have looked through all 500 rows. So how do you get this 500? So this is actually given in the question. So the question told you that there are 500 rows in this array. So we'll be doing something like this. While password is equal to empty string and index less than or equal to 500. Because let's say the password is found, this password is no longer be empty string, and we will just exit the while loop. And what to do within the loop? So within the loop, if domain name is found in the first column of the row, we will decrypt the second column using the built-in decrypt function to get the password. Else, we will move on to the new row. So it means that we will increase the index. For example, you go through the first row, oh, it's not found. Go through the second row, oh, it's found. I will get the password, decrypt it, and then I'll return the decrypted password. And let's say we get to finish the whole while loop. So after finishing the whole while loop, if the password is still empty string, output warning message, and finally we'll return the password regardless found or not found. If found, we will be returning the right password. If it's not found, we'll be just returning the empty string. So these are the core operations. Let's look at the variables. So what are the variables to be used? So we have index, which is integer. Think of it like a row number. So basically this index, basically we are just looping the row by row, like first row, second row, third row, fourth row, fifth row, and etc. And then we have initial value of 1 because we always start from row 1. And the next is going to be the password, which is something that we have to return from the function itself. And it's going to be a string data type with the initial value of empty string. So we just use this empty string from the start to the end. Because if it's not found, I'll just return an empty string. If it's found, I will just update the password to the latest password. And now let's go through the pseudocode together. So as usual, I have all the 5 prompts on the right for you to see. And then let's go through pseudocode together. So first of all, we'll define the function, find password, the input will be name is equal to string, and then we'll be just returning a string data type. And next, let's start with the declaration of variables. So first of all, we will be having declare index as an integer here, and then we will be having declare password as a string data type. And next, we'll be assigning the initial value for both index and password. So the password is going to be empty string and index is going to be 1. And let's start with the while loop. So while password is equal to empty string and index is less than or equal to 500. So think of this like a row number here, like 500 number for rows. And then if secret index comma 1 is equal to name, then so this is secret is a 2D array. Index basically it means they start with row 1 and then 1 is the column 1. So let's say the column 1 and row 1 is equal to the name. Let's say the input name here, the string here. Then we will just decrypt the password. So password will be equal to decrypt. So this is a built-in function here and secret here, and then this is row 1 and this is second column. So it means that let's say when we get to the first row and we found the password, then we just do this decryption. Else we'll be doing just index equal to index password, which means that let's say, oh, it's not being found in the first row, I'll move to second row and then third row and fourth row until I manage to find my domain name. Then I will just end the if statement and end the while loop. So let's say the password remains at the empty string after finishing the whole while loop. So if password is equal to empty string, then output domain name not found. So this is just a warning message. You can write anything that you want, but we just follow this from the answer scheme itself. and then we'll just end the if statement, and finally we just return the password, and then we'll just end the function. So this is the whole pseudocode. So basically there are two main cases. So the first case is if the password is found, you will just exit the while loop, and then you just return the password. And then the second scenario is we go through the 500 rows, and then we are not able to find a password. So we will first output domain name not found, and then we'll return an empty string password from this function itself. So this is the whole pseudocode. Now let's look at C. The module encrypt and decrypt are called from several places in the main program. Identify a method that could have been used to test the main program before these modules were completed. Describe how this will work. So what is the method? The method will be stop testing. And then what will be the description? First of all, a simple module is written to replace each of the modules. So let's say you haven't completed the module yet, no worries, just write a simple module. And then the simple module will return an expected value. For example, we just return some dummy password from this encrypt and decrypt function. So for D, a validation function is written to check that the password generated are valid. To be valid, each password must be 14 characters long, be organized as 3 groups of 4, case-sensitive alphanumeric characters. So the groups are separated by hyphen characters, not include any duplicated characters except for the hyphen characters. Note, lowercase and uppercase characters are not the same. For example, small letter A is not the same as capital letter A. Give 2 password string that could be used to test different areas of the validation rules. So for this question, you can give the right password or the wrong password, doesn't matter. You can give the right password that fulfill all these requirements, or you can just give a wrong password that doesn't fulfill this requirement. So for password 1, I just put something that fulfill all the requirements. So this will be my password 1. So it's going to be A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. So this is 14 characters with hyphen in the middle, and there's no duplicated characters. And password 2 is just something that doesn't fulfill the requirement. So it's going to be the log of A. So this is duplicated characters, there's no hyphen. So this is definitely a wrong password. So for this question, it's actually quite flexible. You can write anything that you want. And now let's look at the final question from this paper itself. The random char module is to be modified so that alphabetic characters are generated twice as often as numeric characters. Describe how this might be achieved. So basically you can do different ways to achieve this, but let's look at the answer scheme itself first. So first of all, generate a random integer divisible by 3, split the range into 1/3 and set as numeric, else alphabetic character. So what happened here is that for the answer scheme itself, this is what they are trying to do here. So let's look at the example that I have here. So first of all, generate 6. So this is a random integer divisible by 3. So this is 6. And then this range is going to be int ran 6 plus 1. So this can be anything from 1 to 6. And then case of this range, for example, 1 and 2, this char is going to be numeric, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, this char is going to be alphabetic. Definitely this is not the right pseudocode, this is just like an example. Like we can't really do numeric and alphabetic in terms of pseudocode perspective, but I'm just putting this as a sake of reference. So for this question, definitely there are different ways to think about this. You can think of it, you have these dice, and then these dice only have 3 sides. So one side is like numeric, and the other 2 sides is alphabetic, so just throw the dice. So the chance of having alphabetic characters is going to be twice as often as numeric characters. So this is a key logic for this question itself. So I hope you enjoy my past year walkthrough. Definitely like this video and share to your friends if you find this video useful. If you want to learn more about Cambridge A-Level Computer Science, definitely can subscribe to the channel or check out for more resources at www.haguin.school. Thank you, and I'll see you again then. Bye bye.